Hello everyone, welcome to our show. Today we are talking about online lessons. Online lessons, how they are affecting children with disabilities. We are talking about students who are living with disabilities, children living with disabilities who are both in primary, secondary, and tertiary education. So today on our show we have Deaf Zimbabwe Trust Communications Officer Tinotenda Chikunya to explain to us what really are the challenges being faced by these children. And also, we wanted to tell us what she thinks the government should do to help children living with disabilities. Over to you, Tinotenda.
Children with disabilities have challenges with online learning because data is very expensive for parents of children with disabilities. They come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So for them to have data that can sustain the child to learn every day for a month or two, or even like now for 4 months that we're under lockdown, it's very difficult. And also children with disabilities need specific adaptive equipment that will help them conduct online lessons, like specialized computers, laptops. Those with visual impairments need laptops that allow them to speak as the laptop types on its own, or those who are deaf also need special laptops. So if we don't have an interpreter on site, then it's difficult for them to conduct homeschooling or online lessons. And when they're doing online lessons at home, some parents of children who are deaf cannot communicate in sign language, proper sign language. They use what we call home sign language. So it's very difficult for them now to be able to convert words like mathematics, photosynthesis, equation, algebra. For them to convert those words into a sign language, it becomes difficult. So communication, or even for them to communicate what the teacher is saying, becomes difficult for the child and the parent. And also on these online lessons also won't have captions, so they become meaningless for a child who is deaf to concentrate on those online lessons. Also, when we look at the issue of electricity now, there's been a lot of load shedding. So for the parents to sustain that under this type of load shedding, the online lessons are almost impossible to have. And then we'll be also trying to call on it's also difficult as well for the child to remain attentive for long periods of times. The children know that you are not their teacher. So children with disabilities sometimes get agitated very quickly. They get annoyed very quickly, especially if you want them to concentrate on one thing for a long period of time. So parents have to start now trying to come up with different routines, because at school there's sometimes a therapist, there's a specialist, and then there's the teacher. But at home we only have the parent who needs to do all these roles. So it becomes very difficult for the parents to help the child to learn, because they have to take on different roles. And in taking on different roles, they have to come up with a routine which the child has to follow, which is not very easy. So online learning during this lockdown has been very difficult and almost impossible for children with disabilities, and they've been greatly left behind. So now I think government can assist in trying to get, maybe for those that will be in public schools, trying to get some of the teachers of the learners with disabilities. They know children with disabilities in their areas. So it will be a good thing for teachers to constantly check on their kids. We know we are under COVID-19 restrictions, but it won't hurt to just keep a check-in, or even on the phone individually, send study packs to the parents, send different materials to the parents. If it is possible to help the parents with small short videos of those lessons in sign language, if the teacher can sign, then that will also go a long way in helping the children to be constantly learning whilst they're away from school. That is one support that they can get. And I think also in our approaches, we had radio lessons, TV lessons. From the onset, all approaches should be disability inclusive, so that whatever initiatives are put in place, we always think of children with disabilities. That will make sure that they are not left behind. When we come up with radio lessons for children who can hear, then let's also consider TV lessons for children who cannot hear. Let's also consider having captions on all those TV lessons. Let's consider the study packs where parents can go and collect work and come back. Constant communication between the teacher, the school, and the parent will go a long way in ensuring that there is enough support. And also we need to also capacitate the parents themselves to be able to teach the children, give them hints, give them tips, give them ideas on ways that they can support the child at home, because the teacher would know best how their child, how that specific child responds to certain ways of learning. So if those ways are then impacted on the parents, if that knowledge is given to the parents, then we know that definitely the child will definitely be learning during that time of lockdown.
Thank you so much, Tinotenda, for your presentation on the challenges that children living with disabilities are facing. Now, over to you, Nokutenda Muzuva. Nokutenda Muzuva is a disability activist and she also works at Gyros Chile. Let's hear from her some of the challenges that the children are facing who are living with disabilities. Over to you, Nokutenda.
As for challenges that are facing children with with disability use online using online platform to do their schoolwork. First of all, I really would like to say, before even accessing the online platform, at times, most children with the disabilities don't have the gadgets, or I might say their parents may not afford the kind of gadgets that are needed to be used for the education that they are acquiring. So you realize that for other children with disabilities, at times you need those software, for example, the enlargement print, that phones that use the enlargement print, or that phone that use voices, it's like a talkback, those kind of applications. So at times they may not even have those kind of phones that do download or that can be installed, those kind of applications. So at times it becomes difficult for one child to acquire a work or to learn online as a child with the disabilities. Then there's also the issue of data. Like we are saying, this child, he or she has got uh, some kind of medications, or let me say, for example, you need to, in my case, I have albinism. So if it's a child, he or she needs sunscreen lotions. So at times parents are failing to say, let me buy sunscreen lotions, then at the same time to afford e-learning, online learning, because there's too much data that is needed to be paid there. So I think those are some of the uh, challenges that are being faced by children with disabilities, because at times you realize that most of them need face to face. At times they might not be understanding through the phone, because some of them may need face to face, like they understand more. We have learning disabilities, so you realize that as a young child, or as a child with a learning disability, you need face to face time. Maybe you know may not even understanding what is being said through those phone. And parents most of the times are not usually there, because they are busy working for that man that is going to be used for the child to learn. So I'm saying that uh it is really difficult for for young children with the disabilities, because most of them, after schools were closed, you realize that there are some centers, which which cater for children with disabilities, which teaches children with disabilities. So you realize that when they close, they just close and the children are sent to their homes. There's no online whatnot or what or work or anything. So I'm thinking there are a lot of challenges that are involved there. A lot of challenges because if you want to look at it, if you even if you carry statistics right now, you realize that a few are learning, a very few are learning. When I say very few are learning, means that as children with disabilities, most of them are taken to centers or special schools, and at times those special schools cannot really afford to say, depending with the disability of a child. At times it is really difficult to say I want to teach this child online. So it's one of those challenges that you see that it's really difficult because when it comes to special schools, there are certain kinds of disabilities that are there that children need to go maybe to therapy, uh, and then at the same time they are not affording that. So you realize that children are really suffering at this moment because when they are at home, they are going through a lot because some of them may be living in the most remote areas. So in those remote areas, they can't afford, as well as the network is really bad there. So once they are off school, once they went home, that is that. There's no longer online learning. It is just over for them. So I really think there's a lot to be done before we even look at the at them using the online platform. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nakutenda, for such an insightful presentation when it comes to children living with disabilities who cannot access online lessons. Now I'm handing over this time to a student who is living with disabilities who would tell us more on some of the challenges he is facing as a student living with disabilities. Over to you, Mr. Babson Lofo.
Or the fact that disability is a complex phenomena when one decides to use online lessons method as a means of education communication. By education communication, I'm simply referring to the medium of communication that is used to convey the education method. I think one has to consider the complex nature of disability. For example, if a teacher decides to use WhatsApp written text as a means of education communication method, he or she has to consider the fact that one can be visually impaired. So if the ones that are not visually impaired are able to read the the lesson that he or she has posted on the WhatsApp group, it doesn't mean that the visually impaired person can also read what the teacher has posted. On another note, suppose one has got a hearing impairment. If a teacher decides to use the auditory method of sending audios via WhatsApp, it also means that the teacher also has to find someone who can interpret that same message using a sign language. So, in simple terms, I'm simply saying that as someone who is living with a disability, teachers should consider the complex nature of disability so that when they decide to do online lessons, they can cater for everyone. who is disabled in all their various aspects.
Thank you all for listening to our show, and I hope that the government will do something to help children living with disabilities and students living with disabilities. I would like also to thank the government for implementing the National Disability Policy recently, which actually cater for students who are living with disabilities for all their school fees. Thank you and have a good day, everyone.